great to be with you today. Hope you're all doing fine. I know I am. Had a tremendous, one of my favorite weekends in quite some time here. Uh, just a really amazing time with my family this weekend. So enjoyed that. Happy to be here with you today. And yeah, getting into the holiday spirit, the holiday season. Excited for more good times with the family and stuff, and to be doing a lot of work and actually some exciting things at work as well. So, all good on that train. Got some debates that I'm lining up, discussions that I'm lining up, so it should be fun to get some of those in the near future here. When the lefties aren't running from me, it's always good to be able to have those sorts of debates. So, haven't heard from you all, or I guess you haven't heard from me, in a few days here. Last time I streamed was last Thursday, so apologies for that. But just so everyone knows, I think I explained where I was going to be. What's up, Raceland? I was we spent 2 days in a hotel out in eastern Pennsylvania with my wife, her family, and my son. We did a Christmas train ride. It was a lot of fun. We went to, it's called Kozar's Christmas Village. It was a big Christmas thing that we could walk to. We went to a Cabela's store, which is like a hunting store and clothing store. And they have a bunch of stuffed animals in there and taxidermied animals, I guess you'd say. And fish, all of that good stuff that you could see. It was just a tremendous week. So the hard part, of course, is I come back and I have to immediately come into work, and then I don't get to see my son for 3 days, but that's okay. That's life. I should have got a better job out of college, then I wouldn't have to work the crazy hours that I do. But that's life. I'm not going to complain. So it was a really great weekend, and I hope you all are having great times here as we get closer to Christmas, as we just left Thanksgiving. So I hope you're all taking stock of sort of the people in your life that matter, and I hope everyone's able to have some good times with them. But even if not, we're here for you, and I'm here for you. And I look forward to having a good show here the rest of the week. And hopefully that'll be some minor consolation. So it's been a lot that's been happening. You had I don't know if it's a coup or if it's a revolution, what word you would use, in Syria. We had the reopening of the Notre Dame Cathedral and Joe Biden being MIA, but Trump being there. We had the shooting of I think it's United Healthcare CEO. We haven't talked about much. We're going to talk about some of that on today's show. And then, of course, the Daniel Penny trial wrapped up today with a not guilty verdict. And so a lot going on in the news, in addition to sort of the progression of Trump's cabinet picks. And Trump did an interview with, was it Leslie Stahl? His first sit-down interview with a member of the mainstream media since winning the election, as far as I know. So there's some interesting things to come out of that conversation, which we could talk about that as well. I thought today we would focus on what I see as sort of tangentially connected issues of the Daniel Penny trial, and then what we're finding out more about the murder and assassination of United Health CEO. It now appears that there's a suspect that's been Kristen Welker. That's it. What did I say? Leslie Stahl? Wrong. Kristen Welker. Yeah. Luigi, some Italian name is his. Mangioli, I think maybe is his name. Is the suspect that's been arrested, that they think is the person who allegedly committed the assassination against the health CEO. And so got some things to say on both those. We'll probably try to go an hour. If we finish up early, we'll take audience questions. Unfortunately, I'm only on YouTube today, and I can't take call-ins because I'm not at the home office. So that's sort of the itinerary for the show today. As always, if you're watching on YouTube right now, which is the only place I'm streaming, so if you are watching, then you must be watching on YouTube, or else there's some CCTV cameras that I was unaware of. Please check out the shorts and the short regular videos that I'm putting up on YouTube. My great editor, Black Elk, just put together a clip from my show last week where I discussed the Ukraine Burisma situation and the pardon of Hunter Biden and why it went back to 2014. So you could check that out. Um, Anything else to clear up? I usually like to wait about 10 minutes before I get into the meat and potatoes, just because we try to give an opportunity for people to jump in. So, is there any little questions, stories had before we jump into the Daniel Penny thing that people wanted cleared up? I don't know if there was any spicy drama or anything like that. My friend's really upset with the Juan Soto signing from the Yankees to the Mets. I'm not big on to that. I did see parts of Andrew Wilson on Piers Morgan. Good for Andrew. The part I only saw like 3 minutes of it, but it looked good when I saw it, and so good for him reaching a bigger audience. I would love to get on Piers Morgan someday. I don't know what the chances of that occurring are, but I think that would be a good opportunity for me, and I would love to be able to do that. But I gotta say, I'm really impressed with Andrew's work ethic, and I couldn't be happier for him getting on to platforms to get more exposure for sort of, you know, not just his ideas, which I agree with many of them, but also his channel and his brand. I think that's, regardless if you like Andrew's um, opinions, his politics, I think he is one of the hardest working people on this space. He basically was the premier debater on Politically Provoked. That whole channel got sort of taken out, and he built a brand up from nothing to what it is now. So, and that's occurred in the span of like basically 2 years. So you really got to tip your cap to him for betting on himself and winning. I think he's really a growing platform, and I can't speak highly enough of his work ethic, even if we have disagreements on some particular policy implications. But more agreement than disagreement. You just can't help it when you're a cantankerous bastards like me and Andrew. We're going to argue with each other, even if we agree with each other more often than not. That's what's going to happen. So, yeah, good for Andrew being on Piers Morgan there. I also saw Scott Horton, who I interviewed last week, was also on Piers Morgan. I saw some of his appearance on there as well last week. So, yeah, it's good to know. It's something I said even in the days back when I was debating Destiny quite frequently before I was blacklisted. One of the things I said was I didn't understand the hate that so many people had for Destiny going on these bigger platforms just for selfish reasons. Like, if someone that you're debating in this space quite frequently is now breaking through to more of a mainstream audience, probably means there's a better chance that more people will break through towards that mainstream audience. So I feel the same way. And I think it also goes to the show to the power that a lot of the mainstream, I think Piers Morgan understands this more than most. He comes from sort of the mainstream outlets. What was he on? CNN Headline, and then maybe CNN or what other networks he was on. And I think he sees to take that credibility or lack thereof at this point with the mainstream media or the networks, taking that and understanding the growth of sort of these online spaces and online creators. I think that's really smart on his part. And it's something that I'd been recommending that people try to do for years now. So I think it's smart of Piers to become sort of the central debate platform that's taking what you saw occurring in like the debate sphere online and then moving that, as opposed to sort of the old mainstream media debate platform where it's just talking heads from the mainstream media debating each other. Now you have sort of people that are maybe don't exclusively on the mainstream media, but have their own sort of platforms that are out there that you then bring on. So I think it's interesting for Piers to do that, and I think he's going to see growth himself. So yeah, hopefully someday I get a chance to go back on there. Raceland, yeah, I saw your comments. Yeah, sometimes Andrew could be get involved in such a micro issue and debating it that sometimes sometimes the broader picture is lost. Maybe I'm guilty of that at times as well, but I think Andrew's more likely to be aggressive on those sorts of things. But I'm not going to give him advice on how to grow his channel, seeing as how he's doing a fantastic job of it. So, what more is there to say on that? So, all right, we're at 10 minutes. Let's do it. Let's jump into the Daniel Penny situation. So, for those that didn't know, Daniel Penny was found not guilty. So, let's break down for those that have been living under a rock that maybe aren't aware of what this trial was. This occurred in New York in a subway. There was and it's important for the story, there was a black man who's sort of like a homeless type figure, who's harassing people, threatening to kill them on the train. He has attacked people on these subways before. Several people. Daniel Penny happens to be a white man who served in the military, who put him in sort of a chin lock, like chokehold from behind. At least one other person helped hold him down. The police came. Daniel Penny ends up getting arrested. You think my eyes? Maybe it's just the lighting. No, I haven't been smoking any doobies, and my eyes don't feel itchy or anything. So I don't know. But of course, Alvin Bragg, prosecutor, that's the head person that was in charge of this case of bringing charges against Daniel Penny, famously was the person who went after Trump and convicted him of 37 felonies that were garbage using a novel case law. Of course, Penny and Trump, both cases that should have never been brought. Alvin Bragg also is decreasing the sentencing, or going after roughly 60%, I think I've read, of criminals, including violent criminals, that are occurring in his jurisdiction in New York. So basically it gets back to that old Solzhenitsyn quote. For the thief to have a knife was just a misunderstanding, but for you to have one or to defend yourself was political terrorism. They go after what's culturally or politically significant, and they allow the violent crime to run rampant. And so this case was only brought because Daniel Penny's a white man. And what's the name of the gentleman who died? I forget his name. I know that's bad form. I was just reading it again. Daniel Penny was the defendant, and the deceased is, someone will tell me in the chat here, but he was black. That's why these charges were brought. In fact, there was a case, not in Alvin Bragg's Neely, that's right, Jordan Neely. There was a case, it wasn't in Bragg's jurisdiction, but also in New York, where it was a black man who killed a violent person on a subway that was threatening passengers. No charges brought. Throughout the course of the trial, we heard just how bad the race basing was, as the prosecutor continually called Daniel Penny the white man. Imagine just for a second what that looks like. Imagine the trial of O.J. Simpson, and they're just like, the black man, O.J. Simpson here. Imagine that. Just for a second, imagine that. But this repeatedly was done throughout the trial. Also, evidence was brought that actually Neely was alive when the police got there, and the police refused to give him mouth-to-mouth because they were afraid that they could get some sort of illness. And of course, the gentleman that was holding down, you could see a picture that kind of it went viral of Daniel Penny where he's holding Neely, and there's a black man that's holding Neely's arm down as Daniel Penny's holding him. The black man wasn't charged. Nor have we heard Black Lives Matter, the NAACP, etc., talk about how that black man was violent. We haven't heard any of that. Most of the people that were on the subway thought that Penny was a hero, that he protected them. And it led to not just a broader conversation of race, but also a conversation about selective prosecutions and about the society we live in, where people don't want to help or intervene when there are violent psychopaths that are harassing people in public anymore. And so that was the backdrop for this case. We'll talk about all of that. Developments this weekend were the charge of manslaughter, which was the most serious charge. There was reports that the jury was hung on this. My guess is there was probably one person that wanted to find him guilty of that, or was still evaluating whether or not he was guilty of that. And so the prosecution did something, and as someone who's not a lawyer, I'm just taking the word for people that I'm reading online, but it seems almost unprecedented. Where the prosecutor, the jury was hung on that charge. Normally, what happens then is a mistrial is declared, and either the prosecution retries the case with a brand new jury, new judge, etc., or they just never retry the case, and that's it. But instead, what the prosecution did in this particular case was they dropped the manslaughter charge, basically ensuring that they could bring that charge again in the future if they wanted, and then allowed the lesser charges of like negligent homicide to continue. Now, what this was an attempt for the prosecution to say, oh, if they're deadlocked, if it's a hung jury on the most serious charge, then if we take that off the table and let them decide on the lesser serious charge, surely we'll get a guilty conviction. And then we could retry at a later date the manslaughter charge if we so see fit. But this will be a way to get a compromise verdict. And there were people rightfully outraged at this. Now, it's similar to what we saw in the Bragg case, where you even had CNN head legal correspondent Ellie Honing that was talking about how there were things going on that he couldn't believe that was coming out of the prosecution, such as the exact charge not really being clarified during the trial until basically the closing arguments. And this novel theory being brought where there was a charge that required an underlying charge that required one of 3 underlying charges, which had never been done to prosecute anyone before, and now being used for the first time to prosecute a former president and frontrunner for president. Same office. Now they're again doing questionable things. And so I thought before this morning that the outcome you were most likely to see was that Daniel Penny would be found guilty on one of these lesser charges, which would have been an outrage. But shockingly, a predominantly female jury in New York found Daniel Penny not guilty of the lower charges. Now, the first question I have, just as a matter of record, is because of the nature of how the manslaughter charge was dropped, someone could correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure what that means is because he wasn't exonerated on the manslaughter charge, he wasn't found not guilty, I should say, on the manslaughter charge, hypothetically, the Bragg office could bring that charge again. But I have seen legal scholars saying that they think that that still could be some form of double jeopardy. But interesting to think that that could be something that could be argued by Bragg's office if they decide that they would want to continue to pursue this further. That's the first thing. The second thing is, what a stunning rebuke based by this jury of the shady prosecution strategy. Like I said, myself and the people I were reading, it seemed they were heavily suggesting, okay, I mean, think about it this way. We're locked on whether or not he committed manslaughter. We don't know if we want to send him to jail for all those years, but this lesser charge, okay. We don't think he's totally innocent or totally guilty, so we'll find him guilty of a lesser thing. So once they got rid of the higher thing, it looked like, there'll be some compromise verdict, that he'll be found guilty on some of the lower charges. But that wasn't the case, which makes it look like, probably my best guess is, there was 1, maybe 2 jurors that were really holding out on the manslaughter charge. And everyone else was like, no, not guilty. And then once the charge was brought off the table, that juror or 2 probably felt, I'm not going to persuade the rest of them. I want to go home. That's it. Not guilty. Let's be done with this. I would find it difficult to believe that it was like 6-6. 6 thought he was guilty on manslaughter and 6 thought he was innocent. But then when you get to the negligent charge, the lesser charge, that all of a sudden the 6 that thought he was guilty of manslaughter caved in. Seems that it had to be only 1 or 2 people that thought that. That seems to be the most likely scenario there. But what a rebuke for the prosecution in trying this sort of shady case. Of course, after the trial, and this gets to probably the most interesting, to me, the 2 most interesting stories here are Bragg, and again, this prosecution, and what they represent, these sort of Soros-funded prosecutors that are intentionally allowing violent criminals back on the street, decriminalizing crime, allowing bail reform to get violent criminals out, while at the same time issues that they find to be culturally or politically significant to them, they're pressing to the fullest extent. That weaponization of our justice system that you see at the FBI is matriculating down to attorney generals, like you see with Bragg, like you saw with Letitia James, like you see with Fani Willis. So that's, again, something that I talk about a lot. And it's, again, I talked about this with Scott Horton. You mentioned the name George Soros, and everyone's like, oh, what a wacky conspiracy. It's not a conspiracy, or at least it's one that's confirmed. We know that Soros organizations are funding the campaigns of many of these prosecutors, and they're running on criminal justice reform, which is allowing violent criminals to commit these crimes all across the country. Now, despite the fact that we were told over and over again, oh, actually, violent crime's down, look at the FBI numbers, right, that revises their numbers and whose numbers aren't matching up with the National Crime Victimization Survey, etc., we can see that even in places like San Francisco, they're ousting prosecutors that are soft on crime. They're voting for reforms that make it raise the criminal penalty and standards for property crimes and theft. People are tired of it. And it's one of those things, and this will go in tangent with topic 2, when we talk about the assassination of the United Healthcare CEO. A lot of people are seeing, I mean, I don't know how else to put this, a lot of these sort of academic types, the educated types, let's be honest, predominantly white people, feel, well, it's not my neighborhood. I'm not really worried. Oh, I have a big heart for the criminal in the inner city. It's not dealing with my neighborhood. Well, now we're starting to see that it's starting to affect more and more people. And they're starting to realize, oh, we're not exempt from this. So that's the first. Of course, the other interesting part is the racial aspect of this. And Daniel Penny was only charged because he's white. And I think that it's time we say it. I've said it many times before. This idea of white privilege, the way that it's promoted from so many of our institutions, including academia, is absolute garbage. Yes, there is white privilege. There's also detriments to being white. Yes, there are disadvantages to being black. There's also black privilege. There's both privilege and detriments to being a man, a woman, a Christian, an atheist, Muslim, Asian. Any group that these cultural Marxists on the left want to say one group's an oppressor and the other group's oppressed. The truth is, all groups are simultaneously oppressed and oppressors at the same time. That's the truth. Not to equal levels. For example, if you're born with a crippling, debilitative disease, of course, that's more harmful to you than any advantage you get from that. But the idea that it's just black and white, well, if you're black, then you're always oppressed, and everything's a disadvantage for you in the United States, is nonsensical. And it's been for quite some time. And we have to pretend over and over. There's this great lie that we're all forced to engage with. And it's been going on for years. We have to pretend that Kamala Harris lost because she was a black woman. We can't look at the fact that she was basically put there because she is a black woman. That's why she got the position in the first place. We had to pretend that Barack Obama being a black man was a huge detriment to him. And ignore the fact that there were many, many people that were so enthused and excited to vote for him merely because he was black. They knew almost nothing about him other than that. Same's true of someone like Hillary Clinton. We had to pretend that being a woman was a huge detriment to her while ignoring the positives. What's up, Peanut? Damien for $2 says, Rob, if you had any interest in debating David Pakman. Yeah, I would love to debate David Pakman. We have to ignore that. The same's true with hiring practices. Oh, black people are far less likely to get jobs. What type of jobs? Because almost any serious company, especially one that's dealing with large amounts of money, like Fortune 500 companies, if there are two equally qualified people, they'll be chomping at the bit to hire a minority over a person that isn't. It looks good for their company. There's a reason why people of Asian descent, Hispanic descent, etc., Asian descent's a better example, pretend to be other races when they're applying for college. We all know it. As a white person, if you fill out a resume, any minority status that you could claim is beneficial to you. It's not harmful to you. We know that, but we have to pretend. Now, is it true that there could be lower level jobs like working for a gas station that the particular employer says, I would rather have a white person? Could be true. But we have to pretend the narrative only goes one way. The same is true when it comes to law enforcement. We've known for years, despite the narrative, that far more white people are shot by police and killed, unarmed white people are shot by police and killed than black people. Doesn't matter. The proportions aren't that stark either. And when you look, I'm sorry to say it, the truth is, when it comes to violent crime, police are probably more likely to use both appropriate and inappropriate violent force when they're in areas where there is more violent crime. Those are areas disproportionately lived in by black people. It does not make you a racist to say this. In fact, quite the opposite. If you're unwilling to try to diagnose the problem, the people that are most likely to be victims in those areas, also black people, never end up getting any justice or safe communities. For years, academia and the lefties, by claiming you're a racist from trying to talk about any of these things and pushing the narrative of defund the police, have made it more likely that inner city black communities have rampant crime. I was called a racist because I was against riots that were occurring after George Floyd that were predominantly occurring in black neighborhoods, including with outsiders from people like in Antifa who weren't even black, who were going into these communities and rioting. It was racist for me to say, I don't like that rioting. Instead, the anti-racist position was, oh, you have to support the rioting. It's the voice of the unheard. How dare you? By the way, where are all those people when those communities suffer? Where are they now? They there helping rebuild them? Or are they like, what was that woman's name? Patricia Collars from BLM that made millions of dollars and built some houses and out now. Now we're out. Right? By the way, it's very similar to the origins of the pandemic. It was racist to suggest that a lab that was partially funded by the United States engaged in gain-of-function testing, which could have led to the creation of the pandemic. That was considered racist. The non-racist narrative was a bunch of backwards Chinese people ate pangolins and bats at a wet market. That was the non-racist position. Now we have this situation with Daniel Penny. Anyone who's remotely objective looking at this sees the only reason he was charged was because he was white and Neely, the person who died, was black. And that's been the narrative. The NAACP came out. There were chanting at the jurors, threats being issued. We're likely to see some form of riot with this as the precursor. Hopefully not. Because in the eyes of the perpetual grievance culture that's pushed by these cultural Marxists, all they see is white man killed black man. Therefore, white man must pay. They don't look at the guy who was helping Daniel Penny hold down Neely, who happened to be black. They don't look at who the victims would have been had Daniel Penny not intervened. Pure racism. That's what it is. Do you remember the Rittenhouse story? So there's a left-wing streamer that I've interacted with a couple times named Vaj. And I remember, I don't have this pulled up, but I remember Vaj debating, maybe he was debating Destiny, or maybe it was someone else, I don't remember, but I remember seeing this clip. Now, the Rittenhouse story was he is open carrying legally. Guy starts screaming at him, threatening him. He tries to run from the guy. He hears a gunshot go off behind him. He turns around. The guy is still chasing him, lunges for his gun. He shoots. Then he gets on his cell phone to call for help. A crowd forms. He runs from the crowd towards the police, and they chase him again. He points a gun at a guy who's pointing a gun at him. The guy that's pointing a gun at him points away. Then he looks over at another person that's trying to attack him, and he goes back to the guy who points a gun again and shoots. Vaj said, if I'm not mistaken, and I could be wrong, but I seem to recall him saying that Rittenhouse's duty was to sit there and allow the mob to do what they were going to do to him. And if that meant they beat him, I guess just pray. That's your duty. And make no mistake about it, that's how so many of these cultural Marxists think. So when you see the video over and over and over on a subway of someone on the side of the street, Alter Void, thanks for $5, says, hey, we need more black farmers, but it's kind of hard when the educators are saying time is racist. Hard to grow food out of season or at night. Yeah, some of the narratives that they put on what whiteness is, and it's like showing up on time, working for a better future. It's disgusting. When you see these videos of violence that's occurring on the street, some woman will be harassed and everyone's like, why doesn't anyone intervene? Would you? Would you intervene? Maybe this will be the legal tipping point. Maybe culture, which is ahead of our politics and legal system, maybe it's tipped enough already that the pendulum's swinging back, and this not guilty verdict helps shows that. But if not, if it continues, we'll be in the same position the UK's in. Which is, you could see people engaging violence, riots, etc., 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 that are from a perceived minority group or perceived victim group. And the police will do next to nothing to prevent that. But if you go online and complain about it, oh boy, they'll be knocking at your door. That's where we're at. Again, back to that Solzhenitsyn quote. The violent criminal, the Soviets said, it's a misunderstanding. They've had a tough life. They don't know any better. But you defending yourself, you should know better. You're privileged. And these people are out there. These prosecutors are out there. Oh boy, they're waiting. They can't wait. They're chomping at the bit to get some privileged person that intervened. Some poor minority or poor homeless person who did nothing, who's just misunderstood. Now Neely's father, who brief reading of it suggests didn't have much to do with his son's life. Now he's trying to file a lawsuit. Cash in. Didn't have much to do with the life when he was there. Now, I don't know. Maybe there's extenuating circumstances. But I've seen this in my line of work. I've worked with people that have no contact with their family because they're adults with autism and haven't heard from their family 20, 30 years. And then something will happen. They get arrested somewhere. or there's some tragedy happens where there's an accusation of neglect. And all of a sudden, some uncle that hasn't been around for 30 years is like, I'm suing. Write that check, baby. I'm not saying that there wasn't racial discrimination in the past. Certainly there was. I think many times it's blown out of proportion in specific instances. But for God's sakes, the institution of slavery did exist. Of course. And there were terrible things even beyond that. But the idea that now we have to have retribution, it's not about equality, it's about revenge. Not people that actually suffered getting revenge on people that actually abused them. People who claim generationally ago their ancestors suffered, so therefore the people whose ancestors abused them, we get revenge upon. How far does this go? Do the ancestors of white people in the future get to claim vengeance, particularly when they're no longer the majority in this question or in this country? That's right, Alter Void. There is slavery that exists all around the world to this day. But we want to talk about that. That's inconvenient. Better to virtue signal and to argue things that benefit causes from the cultural Marxists than those on the left. So it's a good day. It's worth celebrating that Daniel Penny was found not guilty. It's a tragedy that he was ever charged. His life will never be the same, much like Rittenhouse's won't be. Maybe Penny will choose to go back to relative anonymity. Maybe he'll lean into this and go out and speak, maybe write a book or give his thoughts on this. Maybe he'll be negatively affected the rest of his life. Who knows? But it's a tragedy that we live in a system where our culture is so screwed up with people with cultural power that because of this guy's skin color, this case was brought. And that we have corrupt prosecutors that are willing to do this. Yeah, I don't think Rittenhouse is better off for what happened. It's a tragedy. Now I want to switch over to the United Healthcare CEO. For those who don't know, can someone remind me what his name was? The CEO who was assassinated. This was last week, right in the middle of the street in New York. Brian Thompson. Thank you so much, Taylor. Father of two, married man, assassinated on the street. CEO of a healthcare organization. Now they found a suspect and arrested him in Pennsylvania. This guy was apparently valedictorian at one point, went to Penn, which is a pretty prestigious school. I saw the killer supposedly has a YouTube channel. The vids are going to be dropping. Is this the actual killer? Did he have help? Who knows? I don't even know. Where do you even begin? I mean, let's go back and look at the first assassination attempt of Trump. Does that story look legit? Some guy, kid in his own did all of that? I don't know. But I'll take it face value. I don't have an alternative theory or anything. So let's take it face value for the sake of this discussion that it's this Luigi Mangiola, I believe is his name. The initial reading seems to be that much like almost, it seems many of the big events we have like this, the alleged shooter has eclectic, we'll say, political beliefs. So it seemed like many of the people he's following on X would be like sort of, at least I'm hearing this alleged, are people like Tucker Carlson, End Wokeness, AOC. Apparently he's a big Ted Kaczynski fan. anti-capitalist? I don't know. I'm hearing allegations that they're saying he had a bad back, which maybe led him down this road. I don't know if any of this is true, but the story that they seem to be suggesting is this was a very intelligent kid with his head on his shoulders, and then he had back problems, and then presumably he had problems with medical insurance, whatever, with his back, or he started to see the evils of the healthcare industry with his screwed up back. I don't have much to say about his motivations or anything. I'm not prepared to be like, this is clearly a socialist, he's clearly a lefty. I'm not prepared to say that. I don't know. I always try to wait until we have more details, and sadly, a lot of times we don't get more details. Again, go back to the assassination attempt against Trump. Both of them. So I don't have much to say on that end of it. I do have a lot to say. He may be Casimir. We'll see. I do have a lot to say, though, on the morality of the situation. Alter Void for $5. Wait a minute. First shooter, Pittsburgh. Now the shooter found in PA. Rob, why are you trying to head all near you? It's all the crazy. It says swing state. You have me doing a 24-hour stream. It's just people are going nuts. So I put out a post. Granted, I'm busy all weekend. So Thursday I was done with politics. I dabble. I'm in a car. I was not driving, so I look at X a little. I see what's going on. I did post out. I think I'm willing to fight over this, right? First, let's steelman my opponent's position. Yes, it's true that there are people that would identify as right-wingers and left-wingers that are basically saying that this was a morally defensible shooting because our healthcare system is so grotesque, and if you're someone who, was denied coverage on some sort of claim, well then, this is the predictable outcome, and it's morally defensible. It is true that there are people on the left or right saying that. Now, it's also true that there are the people on the left and the right saying everything. You don't think that's a steelman, Casimir? You're right. I guess steelman's not the right term. I'm going to try to be as charitable as possible. The truth is, you can find crazies on all sides of the political spectrum. That's the truth. But it doesn't mean that it's not overwhelmingly disproportionate on one side or another. For example, there are right-wingers that will call for censorship, that want their political opponents censored. But it's overwhelmingly that mentality came from the left. But when you say that, someone will go, ooh, but what about the right wing? Someone on the right said it as well. Yeah, great. So I posted out, and I think this is something worth thinking about, because we saw the alternative to X, what's it called? Blue Sky, which is just the left-wing X. It's what Twitter was. That's what Blue Sky is trying to be. Remember, people are leaving X, lefties are leaving X, not because they weren't allowed to post on X, like many of us weren't allowed to post. For example, if we wanted to talk about there being more than two genders, couldn't post that on X, couldn't post all sorts of things. On many other social media platforms as well. Still have to tiptoe around many subjects, even on this platform of YouTube. It's the truth. Overwhelmingly on the right, though it is true that there are dissident left-wingers that applies to as well. So they left X, not because they're not allowed to post here, but because they weren't allowed to censor you. That's why they're mad. We're going to start our own bubble. We can't engage in free, open ideas. We can't do that. We need a bubble where we control everything. That's what the move to Blue Sky is. And you were seeing all sorts of people, from Taylor Lorenz, many others that were on Blue Sky saying, yay, basically celebrating the assassination of this healthcare CEO. And so I made the point, and I want you to think about this for a second. I want you to think of the average person on the left that's celebrating the murder of this CEO. Who do you think those people, and you can just think of a caricature of any of them or all of them, lefties that are celebrating the murder of this CEO, who do you think they think is more evil? This healthcare CEO or Donald Trump? Who do you think they think's more evil? You're a lefty. You're like, yay, healthcare is a human right. This CEO is evil. We're glad. Who do you think they think's more evil? This healthcare CEO whose name they didn't know until he was assassinated, or Donald Trump? So far, everyone's saying Trump. I don't even think it's close. So what do you think they think about the assassination attempts on Trump? What do you think Taylor Lorenz thought of that? By the way, we could see, lest we forget, it was a Bernie Sanders supporter that shot up Steve Scalise and a bunch of Republicans in a ball field. Why? Healthcare. That's why. He's pissed about Obamacare. Because he believed the narrative, if Obamacare was repealed, then hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people would die. I didn't go around saying, well, that means Bernie Sanders isn't allowed to criticize Republican stance on healthcare. He has every right to. But the obvious double standard of anytime a right-winger shoots someone, oh my goodness, we must condemn hateful rhetoric, hate speech on the right. But when a left-winger goes out and shoots in the name of left-wing causes, no one says, well, we have to censor disinformation about healthcare now. They're not saying that, are they? January 6th happened, and all of a sudden you couldn't post about election troubles and problems that you saw because there was violence that occurred January 6th. That's dangerous disinformation that could lead to violence. But you say whatever you want about healthcare, or Trump saying Nazis were good people, or insert your issue. By the way, it's one of the reasons you weren't allowed to see the Trans Shooters Manifesto. You see, because they were busy saying, oh, stochastic terrorism. We need to censor right-wingers that say things that lead to hateful actions. But their little pet projects like the trans issues, shh. You're not allowed to know that when that inspires someone to violence. By the way, am I saying then that some trans advocate doesn't have the right to say whatever they want on trans issues? No, they can say whatever the hell they want. But that's what's going on with the double standard. So that was the post I made. What do you think these same people celebrating the murder of this CEO that are on the left thought about the attempted assassination of Trump? And of course, predictably, what about the right-wingers? Yeah, I'm sure they're right-wingers. So let me make the claim to the right now why you should not celebrate this. Right? Here's why you shouldn't celebrate this. Let's dive deep. There are all sorts of people. My friend Casimir's on here right now. Casimir finds it, but he can agree or disagree with this, but I think that I would read him correct in saying this. He would find it morally reprehensible and a violation of his rights to be taxed. It is a use of aggression and force from our state against Casimir if they force taxation upon him. Does that mean Casimir would say it's justified to use physical violence in response up to the highest level of physical violence possible? There are all sorts of government actions that I find morally reprehensible. And yet I have condemned using violence, physical violence, as a tool against that. It is not moral and it is not strategic. If you're willing to accept But this guy was really bad. He screwed people over that needed legitimate treatments because he was greedy, which I'm not sure that that's true, but let's assume it is. Let's assume the worst. Casimir. Let's assume that it is. That this guy was some greedy a-hole that personally was like rubber stamping, bam, deny this old lady access to health care. Let's assume. Once you say, well, okay, we think that that person should be assassinated. That same mentality is then used to say, and we don't like Rand Paul. He's advocated for policies that would take away my livelihood. And we don't like Trump. We don't like Tom Homan. He's going to kick illegals out. My uncle's an illegal. I'll defend his right to stay here through violence. We don't like the police. We don't like the mayor. It's the same reason that this needs to be condemned is the same reason that is it okay to punch a Nazi needs to be condemned. Because once you say, yes, it's okay, everyone goes, great, and you're a Nazi. You disagree with me, you're a Nazi. You just said, morally, it's defensible. That's what you said. Are there times when you're justified in using violence? Yes. Indirect self-defense, you are. You're not justified in using violence if someone passes legislation that says that they're going, well, that's fine. You can disagree, Casimir, you're wrong. Is it justified if someone wants to take away your right to free speech? Your right to self-defense? Your Second Amendment? They want to pass legislation. Is it justified for you to go to their home to execute them? Because you say, the outcome if you get the law passed that you want is that I will lose my rights in an acceptable way. Well, it's not the only truth, Casimir, but it's the central reason as to why real Nazis still do have rights. They do. I don't think that that's a claim that you could make. A Nazi may lose rights when in the act of acting out their behaviors, but someone just proclaiming to be a Nazi, that doesn't give you the right to end their life. They don't lose their right to life because of beliefs that they espouse. I disagree. The thought is not the act. If that's the case, then we have an awful lot of people that have lustful thoughts that are sexually assaulting people. No, I don't think it was the Hitler question is nonsensical. Mens rea is motivation, intent. It's not relevant. Buddha, you're making the exact same argument that every shitbag lefty makes. What's my best speed? Thanks for the super chat. It's best speed ride time for Super Mario 3? I don't know. I've beat it once or twice, but it's the same shit argument. Let's say I say this. Well, yeah, I guess that we should have stopped Hitler. We should have used violent force to stop Hitler before he came into power. And then someone like Vaj says, exactly, and Trump's Hitler. So we have to stop him before he does all of his bad things. Now what do you say, Buddha? Nuh-uh, no he's not. And they say, yeah, he is. And then some lunatic out there goes, well, now it's just a debate. I'm morally justified in killing the President of the United States if I think he's Hitler, and I think he is. The idea of looking at something in hindsight and saying, well, what is the exact same moment we should have acted? And if there was a moment we should have acted, that proves something about whether or not this CEO should have been assassinated is a fucking joke. For every one time that you would be able to say, here is a time in history that a preemptive killing would have been justified because this person was so heinous and led to the deaths of millions of people, there would literally be millions upon millions upon millions of other times that people would use that as justification to murder and assassinate people. Which, by the way, we'd never be able to see if it was proven to be correct or not, because we wouldn't be able to see the heinous actions that would have taken place because that person would have been assassinated. So no, you're not justified in killing a CEO because you think, okay, you're not talking about future crimes. So you're asking me, if there is a world leader that you're at war with that is killing your people, are you allowed to kill him? Yes, that'd be the same question as if there is a soldier shooting at you and you're on the opposite side, can you shoot back at them? Yes, that is direct self-defense. It was justified to kill Saddam, or to kill Osama bin Laden. That's not the question of, is it okay to justify killing people via rules? Someone saying, I sign your death warrant, and then killing them is different than someone saying, I am a healthcare CEO that signed rules saying, well, we're going to limit who could receive healthcare or not. Again, Buddha, who I assume is a Trump supporter, can someone explain to me if Buddha's argument is, well, at some point it is justified to kill someone who signs the rules that you think will lead to death? Can you explain to me how you haven't given the justification for an illegal murdering Donald Trump? Can you explain that, Buddha? An illegal thinks, if I get sent back home, I have no connections anywhere, I don't know what I'll do, I'll literally die. Therefore, you would say that person's morally justified, right? The stupidity and the arrogance of the people that want to make excuses for the celebration of political violence never ceases to amaze me. They're always shocked when it's used against someone they want. Oh my God, can you believe what they did? They tried to assassinate Trump. Well, they're welcome to do that. They're morally not justified in preemptive violence against me or anyone else. And strategically, it's a mistake as well for most people. Then I have the right to defend myself with lethal force if they decide to prioritize and come at me or anyone else. Preemptive would be that I haven't engaged firsthand in a direct assault against you, and so therefore you're using physical violence on me because you think actions I take will lead to stages down the road some form of aggression being committed on you. There is literally, once you accept, and I'm shocked as someone who believes in the non-aggression principle that you would believe this. I mean, clearly you know that you can't say this. You can't say it online or you'll immediately be booted off online. So this would be an incredible detriment to you and your movement to even try to entertain that this is a possible strategic defensible position. Bud Gav says, I'm not saying it's justified. Okay. So you asked, I said, no, it's not justified. Glad we're in agreement. I'm not celebrating it. Cool. Glad we're in agreement. I'm saying when someone is putting policies in place that result in loads of people dying, i.e. Hitler, at some point, it's okay to stop them. It is okay to stop them, not through assassination. It's not. How many times do you think Bud GAF, who I know has been a fan of the show for a while, how many times do you think he's heard me debate this exact same thing when it comes to the left? But when it comes to the right, now all of a sudden the rules are different. How many times have I said the same thing? Yes, you're right. We could eventually go back in the past and say that there would be a time that hypothetically you would say that it would be okay to use violence in this particular nuanced situation. The problem is every time you open the door and say that, yes, that's the case, everyone says, yes, and this is the time. This time right now. That's when the violence is justified. Rob said that the violence was justified that one time. Therefore, this case, what's worse than systemic racism? What's worse than a literal fascist like Donald Trump? What's right? What's worse than misogyny? Or what's worse than trans genocide? No, none of these issues that exist today rise even remotely close to the level of celebrating political violence or calling for it. Period. And by the way, I find this to be a huge condemnation on the non-aggression principle and sort of the world that Casimir would want. Because if you're reading between the lines of what Casimir is saying here, in his ideal system without a state, he would, even in the world where the insurance adjusters that we would go to settle disputes would rule against him, he would still say that he would feel justified in using violence if he felt that those adjusters didn't reach a conclusion that he wanted. Which is exactly predictably what I assumed would happen, which is why we would get into the same problems under that new system that we would have according to today. At the end of the day, Casimir feels that he's right, and if he's right, then violence is justified, and that's that. Doesn't matter. And he might say, but I could justify my stance better. Someone else will feel the same way. Alter Void for $10 says, I'm confused. Did the CEO kill people, or did he choose processes that would not save them? So if I see a car choice and don't say the car wreck, should I be killed? Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. I don't even know if people know exactly what this CEO did. They're just like, oh, healthcare sucks. He's a CEO. He must be responsible for the deaths of people. But it is interesting. Is he obligated to save lives? He illegally denied millions of claims. Really? Illegally? He did. Cool. Then the claims were reinstated. Why was he assassinated? He went to prison, right? Congress said, you broke the law millions of times. He went to prison, right? The people were all reimbursed. Cool. There's legal action being taken. Wow. It sounds like there's a process outside of assassinations. I'll try to look at it someday, Casimir. I will. It is not justified to call for the assassination of people. I'm not assuming. I understand that our legal system's two-tiered. I also think the legal system's two-tiered against Trump and Trump supporters. If I have a friend that was arrested January 6th, and I believe it's because there's a two-tiered justice system, am I morally justified in assassinating the prosecutors? Right, Taylor? You assume they're in jail because the justice system is fair. I assume that it's not. It only works for people that are either rich or that are selectively on the right side of political issues. No, classism isn't more relevant. It's not. Just like we could see with the previous. That's not true. The analogy isn't weak. The analogy is apt. If I feel that the assassination of this CEO was justified because I personally know someone or personally didn't receive healthcare that I feel that I paid for, how is that not the same as if I personally think that the system has corruptly thrown into prison and taken the life of someone that I support, that I wouldn't be justified in using violence against them? What's the difference? Now, there is an argument to be had. We should oppose shooting a murderer because another murderer might shoot an innocent. No, we should oppose... And in fact, that's not an unreasonable interpretation of my law. Yes, vigilantism's bad. Because once you say, okay, everyone, murder's bad, so therefore we should shoot all murderers, and my neighbor shoots my wife because he falsely assumed she was a murderer, that seems really bad. That seems like we need something more than someone's gut feeling on who's a murderer before we take lethal actions against them. No doubt right now there are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people on the left that think Daniel Penny's a murderer. So, Casimir, right? Murdering a murderer is okay, right? The legal system's corrupt. It left him off the hook. That's what they truly, in their bones, believe. You say, fine. It's okay to murder murderers. You might say, we disagree. He's not a murderer. They don't care. It's not that I'm using bad arguments. That's the central argument against vigilantism. We've decided as a society that you can't take these matters into your own hands. These forms of political violence, the number one reason that they should not be celebrated or defended is because once you open the floodgates, there are a never ending of excuses on people on all sides of politics that will say that they feel they're being aggrieved and therefore if violence is justified, what do you mean likely? How would you decide? Who gets to determine who's a murderer or not? You would look at the evidence. You make the decision. So it doesn't matter what other people think. You yourself make the decision. So the assassin made the decision. I feel this CEO is a murderer or tantamount to a murderer. He's led to the deaths of people. Therefore, it's okay to murder murderers. So I'm not a murderer because I'm murdering a murderer. It doesn't matter if one of you is correct and one is wrong. The idea that we say that there are moral guidelines that say these are the sort of actions. If you yourself come to the conclusion that someone is a murderer, you are 100% justified in killing them. We should say these rules, these guidelines shouldn't exist. There needs to be a platform outside of an individual's decision in determining whether or not someone's guilty or not. It's the same sort of guidelines we need when we're having any sort of civil society or discussion. I can't have a debate with someone who says, I think my rules are if you're wrong, I get to punch you in the face. We should set up guidelines that say, no, then there won't be a debate. You don't get to participate because the guidelines, and you'd say, oh, no, but all you have to do is argue that you're right. And if you're right, then I won't punch you. That's all you have to do. That's in effect what you're saying, Casimir. Well, I'm only saying murder actual murders, and I'll never come to an incorrect decision. But the guideline, the principle should be it's okay to murder murderers. That's how society should exist. We all agree, all of us, if we as an individual come to the conclusion that someone else is a murderer, then we are allowed to kill that person. We are justified. No, we shouldn't have that set out as society. It's again, if you can't see, look at all the people that you massively disagree with all the time. If you said the guidelines are, I mean, it'd be the equivalent of saying this. Yeah, well, it's not a good analogy. Now, the other side of this issue is, if you are engaged at high levels of society of doing things that are screwing over large groups of people, and you think you'll get away with it because you have political or legal influence, you might piss off the wrong person. It doesn't mean that it was justified what happened against the CEO, or that it's something worth celebrating. But it's always a difficult conversation to have in these sorts of discussions. For example, should a woman be allowed to dress quite scantily while walking down the middle of the street in a bad neighborhood, any neighborhood she chooses at night, yeah, she should have that right, but it's stupid to do so. If she's attacked, that doesn't mean you say, well, we'll celebrate that attack. That attacker was justified. We don't say that. But we also say, look, you got to be smarter about what you're doing. This is an even more stark example of that. If you exist in a society that continues to screw people over, particularly at the lower socioeconomic level, or of any group, inevitably there's going to be predictable resentment. Now, ideally, that resentment leads to a change within the system, and hopefully legal prosecutions if laws were broken, etc. But people may go outside the bounds of what's ethically and legally allowed. Now, I'm okay with some forms of capital punishment. How can I hold this position while also criticizing New York City for Daniel Perry? Daniel Perry was someone who was directly intervening on someone committing violence in the moment, which is different. Alter Void for $5. Damn, better get those birth rates up if we want to start reducing pop even faster. If someone comes at me with a knife, or people on the train with a knife and lunges at them, and I put them in a chokehold and they die, that's different than me saying, I don't like this CEO's policies. I believe I'll go assassinate them. Premeditated assassination. How is it different? Well, one is premeditated. The other is an act of self-defense in the moment. Two, one is a direct act of self-defense. The other is a policy disagreement you're having with someone that you think makes your life worse. They're massively different. If you can't understand so Casimir, your argument is this. If I think it's acceptable for me, if someone attacks my wife with a knife, and I think it's acceptable for me to shoot them, well, then I also have to be okay with the murder of a CEO if that CEO engaged in policy decisions that I think were detrimental to people. Then what do you mean, how is it different? That seems to be what your argument is. What's your argument? You asked how I could come to the conclusion of saying the things I was saying and still criticize New York City for Daniel Penny. Okay, then my straw man to you was a result of you straw manning me. You asking how I could be okay with one situation and not the other shows that you are either intentionally straw manning me or or that you're not intelligent enough to understand the differences in the argument. Either way, I don't care. Me saying, yeah, you can't be for assassinating a CEO because you don't like their policies, while simultaneously saying, yes, if there's a murderous thug on the subway and someone intervenes, it's absurd to be able to prosecute them. There's no contradiction there at all. There is zero contradiction. The perceived contradiction, without you elaborating further, would seem to be that you're suggesting a direct act of self-defense in the moment that wasn't premeditated, that doesn't intentionally that it wasn't sent out to intentionally kill someone, but tragically a person ends up dying. If you say that that person shouldn't be prosecuted, then you can't have the stance that it's not good to celebrate assassinations of CEOs. Explain to me what you meant with, how can I have those seemingly contradictory opinions that clearly aren't contradictory at all? And then when I talk about how, okay, that would mean that your position would be we'd have to be in favor of both of those, and you say it's a straw man, seems nonsensical. Celebrate, okay, the term celebrate, let's take the term celebrate out. Find it morally justified. Okay, not talk about it. It doesn't matter. You don't want to talk about it, but the fact is, let's take the word celebrate out of it. You think that if you think it's morally justified for Daniel Penny to stop someone in the moment that's attacking people, which restraining them, which ends up leading indirectly to his death, that if I say it's terrible to prosecute it, then I also have to have the belief not to celebrate the murder of a CEO, but to just not talk about it and find it morally acceptable to assassinate a CEO. I disagree with you in the heaviest sense possible. I don't see any sort of linear connection to those two situations at all. You might as well say, well, if you're for hunting deer, you might as well be for hunting humans. Both involve the death of a living thing. That's true. Both situations involve a claim of self-defense and a claim of stopping someone that's attacking. That's where the similarities end. the criminal intent claimed in the immediacy an intent to commit murder and was physically harassing people at the time. So he was restrained. That is completely different than someone saying, I'm going to change how our premium structure and who we cover on our policies are. And so someone saying, I will premeditatedly then go murder this person. Completely different. For obvious reasons which you're smart enough to understand. Again, where would it stop? No, immediacy is certainly relevant in this case. Immediacy, the person that's directly doing it being responsible for physical actions. Again, I just want to be clear, and it pains me to say this because I like Casimir. Casimir is telling you who he is. Casimir also admitted that it's morally reprehensible for a government to tax him. Casimir, can you tell us right now why you wouldn't be justified in murdering someone that's trying to steal your property? If someone tries to come in, right now, if someone breaks into your home and tries to steal your possessions, are you justified in using lethal defense? I think so. I think someone bursting in your home says yes. Well, it's also theft to have taxation, so you agree that it's okay to murder them, right, Casimir? Say it with your chest. Don't be a coward. Say it. Let's hear it. Don't chicken out now. Come on. Just like the guy the other night that was telling us we need to stone all the gay people. Here we go. Let's hear it. Go for it, Kaz. I thought so. It's an indefensible position. Well, I don't want to say this. It is a ludicrous position that we should preemptively kill people for taxation because taxation is theft. So the point again, I don't want to hear any moral high ground from anyone on the right, Casimir, or anyone else that ever would criticize anyone on the left suggesting using violence. Because if that person on the left, that morally the violence would be justified. It's just a question of whether or not they are applying it correctly. But if they think Trump is an authoritarian, they're justified in assassinating him. Casimir would have to agree. Yeah, absolutely. Makes sense. If you think, why? Because that's your entire argument. As someone who advocates the non-aggression principle, I think you would understand that. You're outlining the rules of what is considered aggression and when you're justified in using lethal force. You're justified in using lethal force against a CEO of a healthcare company if you think that they've denied claims. That's justification. That would be an acceptable level of aggression that would be, murder would be applicable to commit to them. So someone who thinks that Trump would have policies that would lead to people's deaths, I guess the easiest example would be like, was the shooting of Steve Scalise justified in the eyes of the left? Aren't there people, listen, let me blow your mind here for a second. Obamacare is terrible, right? But it is true. Anytime you have government policy like this, there will be winners and there will be losers. I think there are more losers than winners, but there certainly will be people that got more affordable health care under Obamacare than without. So if it's suggested to repeal and your mother didn't have health care before, but now she does, and you're like, oh, Republicans are trying to repeal that, you're justified in killing. It doesn't matter if you say, yes, but even more people will get health care if the government stays out of it. My mom won't. She'll suffer in the immediacy. So, justified, right? That's not true, Casimir. That's not true at all. It's not a straw. Everything Casimir is saying right now is a straw man. Everything. You have to outline the guidelines of what's morally acceptable before you say, Well, what in each specific situation is true or not? Again, Casimir, yes or no, would you agree with me that there was at least one person out there that benefited by Obamacare, that got health care thanks to Obamacare, that they previously were unable to afford? Yes or no? A simple yes or no. If you don't want me to straw man, fine. A simple yes or no to make sure we're not straw manning. You don't care about my question because you are a coward, because you are a utopian, ANCAP, nonsense bullshitter who wants to secretly just advocate for violence of anything that they feel is any aggression. And you know that you can't say it publicly, but I'll be free to say what you're saying public, what you really think, which is you think you should have the right to kill people because you're taxed. So because Casimir's too much of a fucking coward to answer my question that wouldn't get him in any terms of service extension, I'll answer for him, right? Yes, there are people that would have benefited from Obamacare. Okay, then if it was going to be repealed by Republicans, would the family members or the person that would lose their health care in that situation be justified in saying, this is an attack on my life, therefore I get to assassinate you? Yes or no? He can't call in because I'm streaming on the phone. He can call in Wednesday when I get to my home computer. But I can't take call-ins now because I can only stream through my phone. It doesn't matter. He's not interested in what I'm saying. He thinks I'm one of these people that he normally debates and he can say, you only answer what I'm saying. I've gone through answering as many times as I can. I can't keep up with all the chat. There's a bunch of people. So I don't know what question he thinks I didn't answer of his, but he's unwilling to answer anything that I'm suggesting at him, which just shows that that's how ANCAPs like him like to debate frequently anyways. Well, I understand that, Altered Void, right? But Casimir's argument seems to be something like this. No, saying whether or not you are right. I'm saying that we have to have guidelines and principles that say you can't say, if I think you're a murderer, I get to murder you. That's bad. That we as a society should say we shouldn't leave it up to individuals to say they're justified in murdering other people because they think you're guilty of murder in some way. We shouldn't have that. Casimir's seemingly disagreeing. He's saying no. And when I say, well, the problem with that is all sorts of people will make incorrect judgments. And he says, well, then we judge the people that judged incorrectly. But Casimir assumes that he'll never judge incorrectly, so it's okay for Casimir to say, anyone that I deem a murderer, I get to murder because I will be correct with my interpretation. And when someone else says the same and says, but I'm correct with my interpretation, and therefore I get to murder, you won't articulate what your stance is. And so as I ask questions to try to get more to the central core of what you're saying, you say, I refuse to answer. I refuse. I'm not going to engage in it. So you don't get to bitch about straw manning when I'm trying to actually get more specific by asking you questions and you say, I refuse to answer them. I don't care what you're saying. You're just using the term straw man to get over the fact that you can't make an argument, that your argument's incoherent and inconsistent and despicable. So you just keep saying, straw man, straw man, straw man. Yes or no, Casimir? Is it okay to murder murderers? We'll start there. So that I don't straw man you, how about when I ask you these questions, you just say yes or no? Casimir says, my stance is you don't know whether the assassin is unjustified at the moment, so being silent instead of signaling for the regime is advantageous. That's not true. What? Why would we not know if they're justified or not? We do know. We know they're unjustified. That's what we know. First, there is a problem with knowledge of anything. You could say that about anything whatsoever. You could say, well, we never know if someone was justified unless we would have 100% access to all objective evidence. So therefore, we can't comment on anything ever because without knowing whether or not an action was justified or unjustified, it's impossible to make some sort of commentary, which means that any commentary would benefit the establishment or the regime. That's nonsensical. You comment on things all the time on breaking stories, etc., that aren't necessarily 100% objective truth, or there could be more facts that we're unaware of that we don't have a full picture. So your argument would literally lead to the silencing. You can't say anything until you have 100% conclusive evidence on either way. So then when asked, well, how could this not be justified, right? you would have to say, well, here are the situations that it could be justified. And it seems intuitively what you're suggesting is that if this CEO enacted a policy that led to this guy not getting health care, or let's say the most stark example, his immediate family dying because they were denied health care that led to them dying, would he then be justified? It has nothing to do with neutrality. You could say that in literally anything. Do we know that Donald Trump's not an authoritarian? Well, we don't know. Therefore, we have to stay neutral when the left is suggesting possible assassinations of Trump, because he could be all of the things. Maybe he really did do bad things with Jeffrey Epstein. Maybe he did sexually assault E. Jean Carroll. We don't know, so we have to stay neutral on assassination claims or attempts on Trump's life. Horseshit. Bullshit. That's what I say to that. It's a convenient, cowardly way to say, well, actually, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, I think that I'm okay if there is a perceived aggression that was done by this person, the CEO, that led to people dying. I think it would be okay in an act of self-defense if he was assassinated. That's what you're really trying to say without saying it. So instead you say, well, I'm just saying we shouldn't comment at all. Interesting way to avoid the question, Casimir. The question was, if you're saying we don't know if this was justified or not, I assume you're not saying, well, in the same sense that we don't know that anytime there's any sort of murder, we can't comment because it's possible that that person who was the victim sexually assaulted the mother of the person that did the murdering. I guess technically we don't know any time that could be the case. So I assume what you're suggesting is beyond that, which would seem to suggest that there would be a policy that this gentleman could have passed, which led to, and we're just going to take what I would think would be one of the most extreme situations that you would use in your favor. This CEO enacted a policy that meant that this particular assassin or a direct family member of this assassin was denied critical health care because of this policy. Would it then be justified? Simple yes, no will suffice. To just say, I can't comment, what do you mean it's not your argument? Give me a situation. You're saying we don't know if this was justified. Give me the situation. So, Casimir, yes or no, you tell me if this is your argument. We shouldn't comment on assassinations. We shouldn't comment on assassinations because we don't know if they're justified or not. So I'm saying, in this particular assassination, give me some examples of when it would be justified. We shouldn't comment on this one because it may be justified. So give me some examples of why it could be justified. Go ahead. I said one example could be that you might say would be justified. He was directly denied critical care because of a policy that the CEO issued, or his family was directly denied critical care because of a policy that the CEO issued. You're saying, no, that's not my argument. Okay, then give me some sort of argument. You say it may be justified. I say, great. Give me some examples of when it may be justified. You're unwilling to do so. You keep saying, no, that's not my argument. I keep throwing out which I think would be the ones most favorable to you, and you're saying, no, it's not my argument. Now, the only one that would be more favorable to your argument, to saying we don't know if it's justified or not, is saying something that would be all-encompassing of any assassination or murder, which is, well, perhaps this CEO directly sexually assaulted this man or his wife, or directly murdered his mom or his sister. Yeah, I guess in that sense, we don't know any time there's an assassination. Perhaps the person that assassinated Shinzo Abe, maybe Abe, for all we know, directly attacked. So Casimir, very simple. He says, we don't know if it's justified or not. I say, can you give me a situation where it would be justified? Casimir is unwilling or unable to do so. Could it be any clearer than that? And instead, when I continue to hypothesize what these situations could be, Casimir keeps saying, no, straw man, no, not that one, nope. But he won't tell us. He won't tell us when it could possibly be justified. He won't. Why? Why do you think that is? You didn't give me the situation. Give me, if you did, I missed it, so retype it. Don't be vague. Give us the specific. He signed a law. I didn't see a question. I asked you a specific question. You outlined your position. Your position seems to be, we don't know if this was justified or not, therefore we shouldn't talk about it. I said, okay, in what types of situation would it be justified? I've yet to see an answer. You're saying you asked me a question. I didn't see a question. I'm asking you to give the situation where it would be justified. Let's see the situation. Now, I don't know why you wouldn't be like, yes, you said something about causality. That's what I'm saying. This guy signed a bill, or signed a law. Policy 103 BAC here at United Healthcare says that people that had a precondition of brain cancer will no longer be treated. And Luigi's dad had brain cancer, who relied on those treatments. And he died. Is he justified to assassinate now? And so instead, do you see this? Instead of Casimir saying, here's what the situation is, he proceeds to tell you what it's not. Do you see? It would be real easy. If I said, well, this could be justified or not, and Casimir said, can you give me a situation would it be justified? I'd say something like, sure, if this CEO stabbed his mother. I wouldn't say, well, let me tell you what it's not. You notice the difference there? I would be clear. But that's because I'm interested in a good faith conversation and not... What's happening is Casimir he thinks that this assassination most likely was legitimate, or that it would be legitimate if this guy directly signed a law that directly impacted this person's health care, but he won't come out and say it. He won't come out and say it. He won't, because he knows it perceptually looks bad for him. There you go. Casimir says, I'm not going to tell you why it could be. You choose. Bad faith, coward, stupid. It's your only three options for Casimir there. I know he's not dumb. He didn't give me a multi. Can anyone else articulate what Casimir, when his situation of why this assassination would be justified, I must have missed it. Can someone else tell me what it was? Am I the only... Casimir seems quite clear. He gave me the answer. How'd everyone miss it, Casimir? Maybe it is getting filtered. I don't know. I didn't see shit. So maybe that's what's going on. Maybe I'm being a dick for no reason here. Taylor M said, I assume this is what he's referring to, and I didn't see that. So maybe it's literally not showing up and Casimir's trying to tell me, which would be a lot of the confusion here. In which case, I apologize if that's the case. But yeah, nothing's came up for me. I'm on just live chat, but I'm on my phone. Try posting it again, Taylor. So this is what Casimir said. NH Predict, United Health's AI system, denied 90% of elderly claims. United Health, even before then, had twice the industry average of denial rate. That's your claim, Casimir? No, you're still not justified to assassinate, if that's your claim, Casimir. You don't have a direct causal link? Well, if you can't get it past the filters, you tell me if this would encompass what you're suggesting. Just a yes, no will suffice. This CEO personally signs a rule that denies treatments for brain cancer. This assassin's father died as a result of signing up for this insurance, feeling that he was covered for brain cancer, and now he's tragically dead because this rule that this CEO directly championed and got passed led to his death. Would that be a justified assassination then? I also think whatever question you were asking me, Casimir, wasn't showing up. Let's see, Casimir says he's going to give a counterexample. But I don't know how that wouldn't be a direct causality. Yeah, Joey Zero, that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying he's right and it's not something we should cheer for, but you understand it. But it's not something we should accept as a society and act like it's a good thing. It's not. That's not true. You could absolutely say and be for capital punishment. Having a system, even if it's flawed, that says here's our agreement for when we could execute someone is different than saying we allow vigilantes to go out based on their own individual interpretation to assassinate people. It's completely different. I didn't say it's never acceptable to kill someone for crimes. I didn't say that. I said that you as an individual don't get the right to declare someone guilty or not and then go out and take justice into your own hands. You don't. We shouldn't advocate for a system that does that because everyone thinks that they're right. Whatever you typed, Casimir, it didn't show up. That's literally, since you said here's a counterexample, the first thing I've seen since that is that's a separate argument. And I don't see how people on the right can't see that this... Correct. Even if the CEO is a murderer, it's not justified to kill them through vigilantism. That is correct. Policy signing is more accurate to what this person is and a step further evolved. So I'm outlining my principle, right? But people aren't even going that far. People are saying, no, we don't even have to prove he's a murderer. We get to murder him if we think he signed policies that directly led to people's deaths. Now, if I knew for 100% certainty that 1,000 more than necessary died because of this policy, no, you still shouldn't be. He should face justice in a court of law. If that court is flawed and allows him to get off, then so be it. Then why argue about commie arguments? Well, because you're making the commie arguments. That's why. I could defend my position as I did already previously. You don't get to right to kill a murderer as an individual because you have deemed them guilty. You don't. If they're directly murdering you, if they're in the act of murdering someone, that's different. Were the founding fathers justified at gently caressing tax collectors? Different question, right? That is people that are founding a country, right? That are going against systemic oppression of a country that they feel that they're revolting against. If you want to declare war, if that's the argument, you're declaring war against all healthcare CEOs, sure, go for it. Absolutely. You can laugh all you want, Casimir, as much as you say, so then your system would mean, and I've said this millions upon millions of times. You could point to say, well, the Boston Tea Party was political violence, it was justified, so therefore, when we go out and we beat the shit out of white store owners to loot because George Floyd was killed, we too are justified. Same thing. And Casimir would say, but one was correct at the time and one was incorrect. What I'm telling you is that being correct oftentimes is subjective. So if we go back to, sure, there's a distinction. Sure. The distinction is, one was founding fathers that were going to revolt against the country of origin and declare independence as a country. And that's fine. If a bunch of people, for example, want to defund the police and say Black Lives Matter is a separatist movement that's now declaring war against law enforcement in the United States, whether or not they're morally justified, that's an act of war. It's the same argument that is used every single time there's an act of political violence. They probably were not justified at the time. No, they probably were not. The situation was different back then. Yes, if they act collectively, it would have been justified. Yes, that's what I'm saying. Yes. The situation was massively different back then. Now, it's funny because Casimir, who says, well, we should just not talk about it because of our betters, he actually can't understand that same concept when you talk about the problems when you say that political violence is justified. That as soon as you say that, Casimir, I'll debate you on this in public Wednesday if you want to call in. Make sure you have a microphone that's good. Your microphone's been much better as of late. I'll debate you anytime on it. What you're going to do, though, is, I'll spoil the debate for everyone. Casimir is going to have to say, I can't talk about that because it'll violate terms of service. That's what Casimir's argument will end up being, because he can't justify it. Because Casimir's saying, well, if the Founding Fathers were justified in using violence against tax collectors, why wouldn't Casimir be? Today. Why not? It's no different. Right, Cas? Okay, we'll see. Casimir, if the Founding Fathers were justified in using physical violence against tax collectors in 1713, am I justified in using physical violence against the tax collector today? Yes or no will suffice. If the situation in 1713 is no different than 1913 plus, clearly if they were justified back then, I'm justified today, correct? Right. That's what I thought. And you can see Casimir's on the advice of counsel. This is what the debate will be. Casimir will say, well, I can't answer that. There you go. So the ANCAP position is every single person that pays any amount of tax whatsoever is justified in using violence against the people that try to attempt to collect that tax. Do you see? Now ask yourself, is that the society that the majority of you want? That's what I'm talking about. When you look back at a different time, at the foundation of this country, when things were vastly different, and say, well, the Founding Fathers, and then say, wow, see, that means that morally you can be justified. Okay. This is why in today's society, we should just say no. Now, listen. There are things that I think should be illegal. But I understand, and that might be the case. If this guy's father died because of a policy that was signed by this CEO, I understand, but I still have to say it's wrong, it's immoral, it's not something to be celebrated. We have to have rules and guidelines that say what sort of behavior is acceptable as a society. I'm not saying he's an idiot. He could come from a different worldview, but that worldview is very extreme and surrounded in utopianism. And the practical, real-world applications would be something like you're allowed to use violence at the guides trying to come and collect the taxes from you. Not saying, let me be clear. You don't have to say, I'm not trying to say you're a bad person if you're not condemning it. When I'm saying what Casimir specifically was doing was giving justification for it. When I originally came on, I was talking about people on the left on places like Blue Sky that I saw celebrating it. Then Casimir's comments wasn't really celebrating it, but was saying, I find it morally justifiable. There's all sorts of stuff that I understand, but I think is still not justified. The problem I have is when it's celebrated or when it's deemed to be justified. And I thought that the comparison was quite apt to, as right now, Buddha Gaff, as certain as you are that this CEO is responsible for the deaths of thousands of people, that's how certain Democrats are that Trump will be responsible for the deaths of thousands upon thousands of people. They're absolutely certain. Well, that's certainly true. Like, for example, I could say someone like Dr. Fauci. I don't think I'm justified in going up and punching Dr. Fauci in the face. I don't think I am. I don't think morally I'm justified in that. Because I can't use an act of violence for things I can't use an individual act of violence for perceived crimes that I've seen him as committed. It wouldn't be good morally. It wouldn't be good strategically. And that's just punching. We understand, not going even further. I could understand it. I've seen a lot of pain that's been caused by him and by other people. I would understand, but I would say no, that's still something that we can't accept. I still could theoretically. Right, but punching him won't change it. Because what will happen? It's the same thing. It's the same argument with, like, if I can't convince you morally, look strategically. Particularly when it comes to being on the right. Right, well, Casimir gets that part. On the left, it might be strategic. On the right, it's not. How many people were saying after the 2020 election on my show, in my chat, well, now the gloves come off. The tree of liberty needs to be refreshed with the blood of tyrants. I said, don't do it. Don't do it. Now they're in prison. We had 4 years of censorship, of attacks. That moment being the catalyst. Now, it is true, sometimes violence strategically does pay off. For example, Muslims. Not all Muslims, but extremist Muslims that said you can't draw Muhammad. Sort of worked, right? We'll see if it pays out for them in the long run. But a major media corporation in the United States won't hesitate to mock Jesus Christ. They ain't going to draw no picture of Muslims or Muhammad, are they? And we all know why. Well, yeah, sometimes violence does work, but it only works if you're culturally and politically in the position of power at the first time, or in the beginning of it. It still doesn't change the question of morality. Do I think healthcare CEOs are on my side at any level? My gut feeling would say no. I would say probably not. I would say that healthcare CEOs probably are involved with the government in intentionally inflating the cost of healthcare and they know what they're doing. Sort of insurance's game in general. If a person is objectively bad and punching them made the world objectively better, would you punch them? No. Rather, I reject the premise of the question. Because it's very hard to know if they're objectively bad, and it's impossible to know objectively if punching them would make the world a better place. That was going to be the show tomorrow, Casimir. We're going to talk about Syria. I'm going to talk about something tomorrow. No. Again, no. Because once you say yes, then people say, and that person's objectively bad, and punching them will objectively make things better. Look, I fuck with Casimir because I know he can take it. And I actually frustrate him because he's smart. And I understand what he's saying, not to say things out loud. And I'm kind of fucking pissing on it by saying certain things out loud. But he is right about that, right? The same is true of people that can call for political violence. Let's say, I don't. Let me be clear here. I've condemned political violence because I really believe that. I really do. Right? From the bottom of my heart, I do. But let's hypothetically say I didn't believe that. Let's hypothetically say that really I do support political violence. Should I be saying that on my channel? Would that be smart? Not just from the perspective of, well, I don't want to get arrested or censored, which is certainly true. But even strategically, even if I knew, I had big bucks and I'm Elon Musk's nephew and I ain't going to fucking jail. No way. Me and Kosh Patel are neighbors. We're drinking buddies, whatever. I did get, they're not waxed, but I did get a haircut and they trimmed my eyebrows. So I never understood it anyways. Like the amount of people that are like, oh, after January 6th, Rob, you need to be defending us. I completely condemned January 6th for the violence that occurred there. It was blown way out of proportion. And it was an op by our government as an excuse to crack down on opposition. But there were people that engaged in acts of violence. Some of it was self-defense, but others did engage in violence and it was unacceptable. I'm not defending that. Bigger story is the other shit, but okay, fair enough, great. And there were people coming after that, after it was evident. Like after January 6th, we're on to like January, February, and there was people on my chat that were like, we need more violence. We need violence against all these people. We need to show up to their houses. And Rob, you're a coward for not saying it. And I'd be like, okay, I disagree with that. But let's go with the idea that I'm a coward for not saying that. So while we're watching the FBI have one of the largest manhunts in the history of the country to go after everyone on January 6th, you want me, using my real name, on a public forum to call for violence against sitting members of Congress. And I'm a coward for not doing so. That's what you're suggesting. And I'm an idiot for not doing so. Well, right, Casimir, I've already admitted. I know I'm taking the piss out of you when I say that. I know. That's what I said. You're actually very smart, and it's something I agree with. That it would be dumb even if you did believe, which Casimir is not saying he believes in political violence. He's just outlining historical examples of hypothetically when you could have a philosophical justification for acts of self-defense that appear to be violence. I understand that. Wouldn't suggest that anything going today. Nor am I. But you fuck with each other in the context of just pissing on each other in a discussion and a debate. But it's amazing to me how many people can't see that. So you watch this, largely, I think, one of the reasons Trump wins is the excesses of the left, of the Democrats, of things like an assassination attempt against Trump, and then the official, that's right, Casimir, I totally agree. The official, all sort of official people in the Democratic Party immediately, yeah, but Trump said Nazis are good people and Trump's a fascist and blah, blah, blah. And people are just like, holy shit, look how unhinged these people are. And then we see this assassination of this healthcare CEO. And all these people on the left like, well. And then it's frustrating to me to see people, although far less of them, there are people on the right that are like, well. And it's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? What does it matter what their standard is? The standard is, are they winning with that standard? No, people are getting fed up. So then what should we do in response? Act the same? Even if you believe it was okay for this to happen, why would you say it? By the way, it's not okay. I truly believe that. I'm condemning the assassination. But if you did think it was okay, why would you say it? That's what frustrates me. Even Casimir's not even saying that. He's saying, I ain't going to talk about it. Now, I could come out, Casimir might say I shouldn't be talking about it, but I truly believe this is condemnable and will condemn it. So, I don't get it. But nonetheless, my record will remain unblemished. I'm not calling for assassinations of people that I don't like or positions. And I'll be honest, I don't know shit all about this guy. And by the way, most of the people that are commenting on this guy that was assassinated don't know shit all about him. They know allegedly some bullet points of what his company did. They know in general, insurance companies fucking suck, which is true. Yeah, that's exactly right, Sarah. He had kids. So, I don't know. For me, it's just... Yeah, I mean, that's certainly true, Casimir. And that's one of the big problems with these health insurance is it always amazes me because when you hear, this is the quintessential example that like health insurance of when you hear people say, well, the problem's these greedy corporations. That's the problem. And so they cheer for bigger government. But the reason that these health insurance corporations are allowed to be as greedy and disgusting as they are in the first place is because of all of the government interventions and regulations. Then the ones that cozy up to them and have the most influence are the ones that are able to take advantage the most. But yeah, you're right. Absolutely, Sarah. It's more than just one person. So it's not complicated in this sense. I wholeheartily condemn this. I'm not for this sort of vigilantism. I might understand why an individual that feels they got screwed over might be... Like, let me give you an example. Maybe this is showing me being an old man. So, does anyone remember the Enron debacle? Maybe I'm too old. And others won't remember this. But I remember being a young person. And the story of Enron's fascinating. It's a super fascinating story. But one of the things that really stuck with me was I didn't understand this as someone at the time who's like working at like, I don't know, Burger King, then Goodwill, then I worked as an assistant debate coach. Like the idea of having like a 401k or having, you know, part of my paycheck gets put aside that goes to some investment and they're just making investments on my behalf. I'm not sitting there going, this stock, this stock, this stock. Some of that I do, but most people don't do that at all. They just, yeah, okay, put it in this fund, then that fund invests. So I remember hearing about this one town in particular. We had all these township workers who had worked 30, 40 years, and they had hundreds of thousands of dollars in savings. And whatever particular investment group they put this into was heavily invested in Enron stock. And so then when all of it collapses because of this corruption, you had people that were like a month or two away from retirement that went on sitting on $400,000 for retirement to now sitting on like $2,000. And part of me was like, look, man, if you're that guy and you're retirement age, you might just say, you know what? I'm going to take matters into my own hands. And that's what like 23-year-old Rob thought. But as you get older and wiser, you're like, that's understandable to have that feeling, but you have to have more self-control and understand why we shouldn't exist as a society like that. Now, are there times where it gets a little more morally cloudy? Yeah. I have to not run afoul of term of service here. But what is the name of the gentleman? You see this video all the time. It's a terrible story. There was this karate instructor, and he assaulted a child that was one of his students. And he's in handcuffs, and he's being led through an airport. And the child's father takes matters into his own hands and ends the situation permanently. That's different than someone passing a law. Gary Plotch, yeah. He was found guilty, but basically they gave him leniency in the setting. I think he had house arrest for a couple years. Rob, do you analyze Twitter from the perspective of signaling, the meta conversation? For example, do you ask whether the story assists the regime in any way? I do before commenting. Sometimes, but sometimes not. Most of the times, yes, though. Now, in the context of a debate, I'll debate anyone on any particular issue, even if I think, but that's why, like, sometimes that's one of my greatest weaknesses. That's how I got stuck debating January 6th every week for like 5 weeks in a row. And then when I get invited to play poker games, they're supposed to just be friendly poker games with a bunch of lefties. The first topic comes up, how could you vote for Trump after January 6th? After the, like, all of that is just benefiting the regime. The more they can keep that in the news. And so eventually I was like, I've had this debate with everyone that claims to be skilled at it. I'm done having this debate, right? So in that sense, I agree with you, Casimir, that I understand the futility in that. I do think there's benefit to bringing this subject up, though. I think there is clearly benefit in pointing out the excess of the left and cheering for the claiming a moral high ground and be compassionate people that are celebrating the murder of this healthcare CEO. I think that harms the establishment that is pandered to this left and to this woke people. So I think that I'm actually attacking the establishment by bringing this up. That's how I feel. I think that it is a strategic error to just let the left get away with celebrating and calling for assassinations like this. And it's not just, it'd be one thing if you're like, yeah, it's just someone like Vaush. It's not. It's people that were hired at major newspapers like Taylor Lorenz. What does being woke or being left have to do with this at all? Disproportionately, the amount of people that are celebrating this are people like on Blue Sky, media people that claim to be morally compassionate, people that are celebrating this assassination. Disproportionately, that's coming from the left. That's what it has to do with being on the left. Because disproportionately, the left believes that if there is a policymaker that does something that they consider immoral, that they're justified in using violence to stop it. In fact, they think that words against them are violence, but violence they take against people that use words they don't like are self-defense. So that's what it has to do with the left. So anyways, I planned on going an hour. Thank you, Casimir, for coming and giving me the good content. It's been 2 hours. So where do we go from here? All right. First off, thank you so much to Sarah Kane. You should check out Sarah's channel. I saw she was commenting here. She also has a new book coming out. Sarah, I was busy all weekend. I will be ordering your book and hopefully writing a glowing review. I know it's going to be fantastic. If you're still in the chat, Sarah, I can't bring up the name of your book right now because I'm on my phone, but if you could type the name of your book, I think you should all check it out. Sarah is absolutely phenomenal. She's one of the best channels out there that's giving a Christian perspective, and she's talked so much on the excesses of the left, like I'm talking about at least somewhat here today, except she does it, Falling Foundation. She does it in a far more articulate, less grumpy way than me. So please check that book out. I will be ordering it, reading it, and then doing a review both on Amazon or wherever it's sold and on my channel, and hopefully I'll bring Sarah on to talk about the book once I get to read it as well. So please check that out. I think you guys will love it. Also want to thank Casimir, who, despite my grumpy bitching and whatever at him, is one of my favorite people to talk to. I love talking to Casimir, and I know he's a smart guy. I happen to disagree somewhat on the periphery on this, though. Probably if we were sitting next to each other and it wasn't public, we would be able to have a better conversation on this and agree more. A lot of the shitty terms of service and worrying that things will get misconstrued hampers this. Plus, I was yelling like a fucking maniac when literally Casimir was Casimir was accusing me of not answering questions that literally weren't showing up, and I was accusing him of not giving answers that literally weren't showing up, so that's my fault. I should understand fucking terms of service in places like YouTube. Also, I need to stop swearing as much. Ugh. My kid used the word a-hole the other day. Oh, no. I gotta stop. I don't swear a lot. I swear way more on stream than I do but it happens. I was yelling about a work situation. I was like, that asshole. And Hank's like, asshole. I was like, oh, no. No. So if I swear less here, I know that I'll swear even less in my outside of streaming life. So I need to do that. Tomorrow, I wanted to talk about Syria and my limited knowledge of that, and it's sort of another entanglement that the U.S. seemingly will be involved with. So we're going to talk about that. Also, I thought it'd be interesting to talk about where we're at with Ukraine and leadership when it comes to the international community. The opening of the Notre Dame Cathedral, Biden's not there. Dr. Jill was there, and Trump was there. But already, it's what a joke that we have on the international community. And it's no wonder that Biden's popular with so many people in the international community. They don't want a strong leader that's advocating for America first in the rest of the world. They want a leader that will bend to their whims. So, talk about that. And maybe some other news stories will pop up. So, thank you so much. So again, tomorrow night, around 7, 8, you'll see me on here. It'll be YouTube only. Wednesday should be a normal stream. I got some people. Alex PWF wants to have a debate on, and this is what I was told, quote, the election. Okay, sure. Let's do it. Let's debate the election. Why not? I don't know what that's going to be about. Someone else reached out to me about a debate. The name escapes me right now, though. But we'll set up a debate. And then I'm assuming we'll do a call-in, and everybody will come out of the woodwork and tell me why women shouldn't have the right to vote, and why we need to be a Christian nationalist country, and, Jola. No, I haven't heard from Jola, to my knowledge. Vita for $2. Did I see Andrew and Piers Morgan? Clips of it. I plan on watching the whole thing by tomorrow, so hopefully I'll have some comment on it. But sometimes it's tough here at work. Like, I'm downtime now. I've been down for 2 hours, which is nice. Other days, it's like just no downtime, so it's hard for me to even get on X or to watch a video or anything like that. So, all right. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate all of you. Thank you for the donations. Also, for those that wonder, my car that shit the bed the other day, it was battery, alternator, tie rod end. I needed to get inspected. So it's going to be $611. So that's nice right before Christmas, a nice $611 bill. So the $31 today will go a long way and just starting to pay for one of those. So I do appreciate the financial donations. I do. You guys are the best. I know this economy sucks. Hopefully things get better under Trump. So now it wasn't an accident. My car just stopped. It was a blizzard out. Well, blizzard. Maybe probably got 4 inches of snow. But about if you want to donate, just give super chats. That's good enough. Or you could my PayPal link. I'd probably get more from PayPal than anything else. So if you donate in PayPal, the links are there somewhere. I think it's just Rob Norn PayPal. But don't stretch yourselves. I'll be all right. I'm not missing many meals. Yeah, PayPal takes less of a chunk. Of course, you could always just send me a direct check, but that involves giving out. I got to get a P.O. box. I used to have a P.O. box. People would send me things. I don't like giving out my personal address. I give out my personal address to someone like Casimir or Sarah, but I know Casimir and Sarah, so that's a little different. But to just, you never know. Some of the lunatics that you deal with, you really be giving out your personal address. We'll get that. It was just a battery alternator. It stalled. We got to take into. I have Stream Elements. I don't do Streamlabs. But again, I don't know how to use that on the phone. Right? See, old Joe agrees. He's a maniac. So, right. Now, here's the sad part. You can find my address, just like anyone that's a public figure. It's not that hard to find. But yeah, that's what it's going to be. P.O. Box, decent distance from home. That is going to be the plan. It's at least 15 minutes from my house, a P.O. Box. And then just check it like once a week. So, all right, everyone. We'll see you all tomorrow night. It should be fun. Thank you so much, everyone. As always, have a good one.